Everything a person says to you has been filtered. By the time a thought becomes a sentence and exits someone's mouth, it has been edited, consciously or not, for the impression it will create, the reaction it will avoid, the image it needs to maintain. Language is the most processed signal a human being produces. It is the most managed, and because it is managed, it is the least reliable window into what is actually true. The people who understand this, really understand it, don't primarily listen to what someone says. They watch what someone's body does while they're saying it. There is a hierarchy to human communication that most people have never been taught. At the top, the most controllable layer, is the content of speech, the actual words. Below that, slightly harder to manage, is tone and pace. Below that, partially subconscious, is facial microexpression. And at the bottom, the layer most people have essentially no conscious access to, is the body posture shifts, freeze responses, orientation changes, the direction of the feet, the tightening of the jaw. These deeper layers of the hierarchy are not mute. They are constantly broadcasting. Most people just don't know the frequency. Before any behavioral tell means anything, you need a baseline. This is the single most overlooked principle in behavioral analysis, and it renders most amateur lie detection completely useless. A person who naturally looks away when they think is not showing deception when they look away mid-sentence. A person who gestures expansively is not hiding something when their hands move. You are not looking for specific behaviors in isolation. You are looking for deviation from that individual's established pattern under neutral conditions. Baseline first, everything else second. Without that foundation, you are doing astrology with a nervous system. When the nervous system detects threat, including the threat of exposure, one of the most primal responses available is to freeze. In animals, this is stillness before flight. In humans, it manifests as a sudden, uncharacteristic reduction in movement. If someone who gestures while talking suddenly goes still, if someone who leans forward while engaged suddenly pulls back into the chair, if the animation disappears from a face that was animated a moment ago, the body has registered something as dangerous and reduced its surface area. This is not proof of deception, but it is a signal that deserves a second look. Something in the exchange just hit a nerve. The neck is one of the most telling structures in behavioral analysis. The carotid artery runs through it, and the nervous system is acutely aware of the vulnerability of that area when emotional stress spikes. Many people instinctively move a hand toward the neck, touching the suprasternal notch at the base of the throat, covering the throat briefly, rubbing the back of the neck. This is not a conscious gesture. It is the body attempting to regulate its own threat response through touch. Men tend to grab the back of the neck or throat. Women tend to touch the suprasternal notch or cover the throat with the hand. Either way, the timing matters. Watch for what just happened in the conversation immediately before the gesture appeared. The body points toward what it wants and away from what it doesn't. This is operating well beneath conscious choice. The torso, and particularly the feet, which are the furthest from the thinking brain, and therefore the least likely to be socially managed, tend to orient toward the desired direction, regardless of what the face is doing. A person can smile at you while their feet are already turned toward the exit. A person can claim to be invested in a conversation while their torso has been gradually rotating away from you for the past 10 minutes. These are not dramatic signals. They are quiet ones. But in the body's vocabulary, orientation is declaration of intent. When someone is constructing a false narrative in real time, There are cognitive demands placed on the system that normal conversation does not require. Sustaining a lie requires monitoring the content of the lie, tracking what the other person knows, managing emotional responses to stress, and maintaining a coherent false timeline simultaneously. Under that load, the body tends to simplify, gestures reduce, head movements that normally punctuate speech become less frequent. The eyes often go still and somewhat vacant, not because deception causes stillness, but because cognitive overload does. The story might be smooth, but the body looks like it's working very hard to tell it. Language itself, when you move below contempt and into structure, produces its own tells. Someone under stress tends to use distancing language, referring to themselves in the third person, using the passive voice to remove themselves from actions they took, saying that happened rather than I did that. The use of unnecessary specificity is another signal. The person who tells you the detailed story about exactly where they were and who they saw and what was said, when you only asked a simple question. Truthful people answer questions. People managing a narrative produce performances. The architecture of the sentences will show you which one you're receiving. A microexpression is a full emotional expression that crosses the face in under a quarter of a second. It cannot be voluntarily suppressed once it begins, and it will appear whether or not the person wants it to, on the face of someone telling you they're fine right after a flash of grief, on the face of someone claiming not to care right after a flash of contempt, on the face of someone agreeing with you right after a flash of disgust. You do not need specialized training to begin detecting them. You need to slow down. You need to stop monitoring for content and start monitoring for the moment between the question and the composed response, because that moment, that fraction of a second before management takes over, is when the real signal appears. The most sophisticated readers of people are not the ones who have memorized lists of tells. They are the ones who have learned to watch the way you watch something you care about without agenda, without rushing to conclude, without needing to be right. The body is always transmitting. It is telling you about comfort and fear and desire and concealment in real time, in every conversation, with every person you encounter. You don't have to become suspicious to use this. You have to become present, because the information has always been there. You were just trained to look in the wrong direction.